a great exchange and discussion as well. So let me begin then. Thank you, everyone. Hello and good evening. Thank you for joining today's meeting of our Coffee Night series, where we will be hosting Petra El-Soufi from Institute for Social Policy and Understanding for her talk about American Muslim women. My name is Ibrahim Anlı. I'm the Executive Director of Rumi Forum, which has been active in DMV area for over 20 years, dedicating its energy to interfaith and intercultural understanding. So I encourage everyone to learn more about our work from our website at rumiforum.org. As a ground rule, all participants will be muted, and we encourage everyone to type in their questions into the chat box as the talk proceeds. Our moderator this evening is Dr. Semia Topal, visiting assistant professor at William and Mary in Virginia. She's teaching on Islam, women and gender, Islam and secularism. So our presentation and our presenter and our moderator have very similar interests, similar combination of words about their work. So I'll leave the word to Dr. Topal and look forward to a great exchange. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure for me to be part of this meeting and to be joining you from all the way from Williamsburg. And I will be reading a brief, short bio of our speaker, and then she will give us her talk, her presentation, which will be around 25 minutes. And then we will have our Q&A session. My role will be, mainly to read the questions that you write, but I might also get some chance to ask my own questions, hopefully. So our speaker is Petra El-Soufi. She is the Outreach and Partnerships Manager at Institute for Social Policy and Understanding. And there she strengthens our valued partnerships and forges new ones with organizations who share our goal of empowering American Muslims. And she joins ISPU after serving more than 4 years as an educator at the Arab American National Museum, where she worked with educators, students, and professionals. And in her role at the museum, she educated visitors about the history and the contributions of Arab Americans, as well as stereotypes and challenges they face. She also serves as a board member on the Michigan Council for History Education. And Petra is a graduate of Grand Valley State University, where she earned a BA in political science. I'm very excited about listening to your talk, Petra, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the Rumi Forum for inviting us and inviting me to give this talk. It's a pleasure to be with everyone here and to see familiar names and faces in this group, and to give a talk about a topic I'm extremely passionate about. As someone who is visibly Muslim, you could probably imagine I've answered questions related to Muslim women a little too many times over the last 20 so years that I've been in the professional work. So just to add one thing to my bio, I have been doing education around American Muslims, Arab Americans, minority groups, combating stereotyping, and in interfaith work for more than 18 years. So I have seen and answered probably every question you could think about related to this topic. What I'm going to do today is for the next 20-25 minutes, I'm going to present what ISPU have on this topic. So our data related to Muslim American women, and then I'll open the floor to questions either related to the data or, otherwise could be about a topic that I didn't cover here. So the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, I am fortunate to be working for this organization because this is the organization that does research on American Muslims. Everyone talks about American Muslims. We do the research on them and have the facts. So you will see here, ISPU provides objective research on American Muslims to support well-informed dialogue. So our job is to have the facts and help inform decision-making. And you'll see it here, we envision an America where Muslims are thriving and equal. Okay, we do research in 4 different areas. Our research is objective and solution seeking. What that means is we don't just look at the problem and highlight it and tell you, take the problem, figure it out. We provide recommendations for that go along with a lot of the research that we do. That way, policymakers, community members, leaders, educators could take that research and implement the recommendations to improve whatever problem they're working on. And then the research we do is focused on family and wellness. So looking at the American Muslim community, how does the family and wellness area look like? How do our institutions look like? So institutional capacity. We also focus on American pluralism, and the combination of these 3 things is really what brought me into ISPU, because I've always been conflicted between, do I work closely with the American Muslim community or do I focus on the larger society? And in this work, I'm able to fortunately do both. And then the last one is Muslim contributions. I mentioned a survey that we're collecting right now, documenting American Muslim contributions related to COVID-19, but we do Muslim contributions, outside of the pandemic that's happening right now. We take that research and we educate. We educate the public, we educate policymakers, we educate educators. And then we hope to equip decision makers with the facts and with the data. So whenever they're making a decision, whenever they're making a policy, it's based on facts and based on information, not based on what the media is telling us or guessing or stereotypes. Okay. Why is the work that we're doing important? And for a lot of people here, you will not be surprised by what I'm sharing with you, but half of Americans know a real Muslim. We put a real Muslim here because most of them know something about Muslims from, the media. And the next point, you'll see that 90% of media coverage of Islam and Muslims is negative. So they know about Muslims, but it's mostly negative information that they know about them, compared to 73% negative coverage of North Korea. And so for those who are in the policy or political sphere, you'll know the significance of these 2 comparisons. You'll also see over the last 25 years, the New York Times, which a lot of people will accuse of being sympathetic to Muslims, have portrayed Islam and Muslims more negatively than cancer and cocaine. So let that sink in for a minute. And in related to today's topic, the most salient or the most widespread stereotype against Muslim Americans is that most Muslims living in the US are discriminating against women. We're going to come back to this point, but this is the most widespread stereotype against the Muslim American community. Okay. Oops. So who are American Muslims? Very quickly, I'll just cover some of the information about us as a community to give you a background. Muslim Americans are the most ethnically diverse faith community in the nation. We don't have a majority race or ethnic group. We have 28% of American Muslims are of Black or African American background. That's the largest segment of our population. It's significant because for a couple of reasons. One, most Americans don't associate Muslims, Islam with African Americans or Black. And 2, you'll see here we have a very, very diverse faith community. It's the most diverse faith community in the nation. It doesn't only look like what the nation looks today, it looks like what America will look like tomorrow. So it is really important to know more about American Muslims. It is also the youngest faith community. 23% of American Muslims are between the age of 18 and 24. And most Muslims are American by birth or naturalization. So you'll see it here, it's not that significantly different than other faith communities. But also part of the story, we focus a lot on the model, the engineers, the doctors, the lawyers, but we also have a third of our community have reported being at or below the poverty line. So that's also part of our narrative and part of our story. And it's important to recognize that to show the complexity of the American Muslim community, but also to focus on where the needs are. Okay. You'll see here, Muslims, just like other faith communities, are similar to Christian communities in terms of education. I'll come back to this when we talk about gender issues. And just like other communities, we care about what other people care about. We care about jobs and economy. That's the #1 issue that American Muslims are focused on. But unlike other communities, bigotry, civil rights, racism, and discrimination are the #2 issue item for American Muslims. And that's because we are on the receiving end of an increased discrimination and racism in this country. Okay. You'll see here after the presidential election of 2016, it's not surprising that Muslims and Jews experienced the most fear and anxiety after that election, not only because of everything that was happening during the election cycle, but because of what came after. And as after the 2016 election, you'll see that Muslims actually experienced the most religious discrimination. And this is important because Muslim women were, discriminated against, and not only religiously, racially, but also because of gender at a higher level than other groups, other faith communities. Okay. To reiterate, Muslim women, and when we looked at American Muslims specifically, among the American Muslim population, women, 69% of Muslim women have experienced religious discrimination. 73% of Arabs, Muslims experience, religious discrimination, and then of course, young people as well. This one is an important fact for me here. We mentioned the most salient stereotype is that Muslims discriminate against women. And the stereotype out there is that Muslims disproportionately discriminate against women. When we ask the question about gender discrimination, religious discrimination, and racial discrimination, we found really interesting information here that when it comes to gender discrimination, so misogyny, there really wasn't that much of a difference between Muslim women experiencing misogyny versus women in the general public. It's an issue that women face no matter which faith background they belong to. But when it came to religious and racial discrimination, Muslim women experienced it at a higher percentage than women in the general public. So you'll see here religious discrimination, 69% of Muslim women experience religious discrimination, and 75% of Muslim women experience racial discrimination. So not only do we experience, the misogyny, the gender issues, just like other women, we also have the religious discrimination and the racial discrimination to go along with it. So if you think of African American Muslim women who are part of, 1/3 of the Muslim American community, they're not only experiencing the gender discrimination, but also the religious and the racial discrimination as women in this country. And what does that mean for their health issues, their mental health issues, the job opportunities, a lot of things that could be impacted by the discrimination they face. Okay, so this is on the discrimination issue. What do Muslim women think about these issues or others? When it comes to the direction of the country, Muslim women, they trust their guts, and they are not satisfied with where the country is heading. 17% of Muslim women are satisfied with the direction that the country is heading into, compared to 34% of Muslim men. And that's very similar to Black Americans. When it comes to Muslim population, only 16% are satisfied with the direction of the country. And again, it could be related to the fact that they are on the receiving end of all these different discriminations. Most Muslims, and in this one we found no difference between men and women, are very proud to identify as member of their faith community. So even though they're experiencing discrimination, racial discrimination, gender discrimination, religious discrimination, lots of issues, they're still very proud to identify as part of this faith community. One interesting fact, this is a question that I've always been interested in as someone who studied political science and also being visibly Muslim, is there's a difference between being very American and being very strong Muslim. Does one come over the other, or does one impact the strength of the other? And our research find that actually having a strong faith identity translate to having a strong American identity. So the two go together, and the opposite is true. Having a weak religious identity translate to a weaker American identity. So we don't see a difference between your Muslimness and your Americanness. They actually complement each other. I'm going to go back to this slide over here. The most stereotype about in the general public is that Islam is discriminating against women, or that most Muslims in the US discriminate against Muslim women. We asked Muslims what do they think about that, and they disagree. They strongly disagree with that statement. Most Muslims living in the US believe, actually only 10% of Muslim women agree with the statement that most Muslims living in the US discriminate against women, compared to 13% of Muslim men. Okay, and if you look at the general public, the percentage are a lot higher. I'm gonna look at a couple issues that are often tied to Islam, or try to be, are often presented as this is a problem with Islam or with Muslims. One of them is domestic violence, which everyone is talking about, especially as more people are staying home right now, and unwanted sexual advances. Those two issues are often presented as, this is a Muslim problem. When it comes to domestic violence, we found that in the Muslim American community, yes, we experience domestic violence at a 13%, but that's not any different than in any faith community. It's not significantly different than any faith community. So it's not a religious issue. It's a gender issue. Domestic violence is a gender issue. And when we tie that problem to a religion, to one religion, we actually harm the victims and harm people working to remedy these problems. Okay. What's significant, though, is in terms of reporting. We found that Muslims are actually more likely to report domestic violence in their community, not only to religious leaders, just like all other faith communities here, but also to law enforcement. And you will see in the Muslim American community, we actually reported to both religious leaders at a higher percentage than other faith communities. But we also reported about equaling to law enforcement communities. Similarly, with unwanted sexual advances, the last couple of years we have been living in the Me Too movement, movement era, And so we did ask the general public in the Muslim community, you know, do you know anyone personally in your faith community who have been a victim of unwanted sexual advances from religious leaders in your faith community? And again, we didn't see any difference between Muslims and other faith communities. It's not significantly different. But what's interesting again is the reporting. Muslims are more likely to report it again to both faith leaders and law enforcement, and actually law enforcement at a higher percentage than most other faith communities, at a 54%, excuse me. Muslim women surpass men in education. So 73% of Muslim women have post-high school education compared to 57% of Muslim men. They're more likely to be middle class. We have 43% of Muslim women are in the middle class bracket, 30,000 to 100,000 a year, compared to 38% of Muslim men. They're also more likely to take action post-election, not only to increase their donation to organization in their communities, but to contact policymakers in their community. 21% of Muslim women, compared to 20% of Muslim men, reported communicating with a local official in the 2018-2019 time period. Everyone's favorite topic related to Muslim women, and the only topic that we are associated with often is the hijab, you know, or the headscarf. Why do we wear it, or why we don't wear it? First of all, majority of Muslim women don't wear the hijab in the US. But among those who do wear the hijab, the question was asked, why do you wear it? One of the perceptions out there, and I know I have personally answered that question way too many times to care about answering it, is, you know, are you forced to wear it or not? And the data show that actually 54% of Muslim women wear the hijab or the headscarf out of religious obligation, or to please God, or out of piety. So it's a religious obligation for them. 21% wear it because of personal identity. So they want people to know they're Muslim. 12% is modesty. And then 1% wear it because someone else have told them to wear it. That percent, while it's still important to recognize it, it's important to also see how it relates to other faith communities. So 1% of American Muslim women said someone in their family, spouse, you know, required them to wear the hijab. 8% of Jewish women said someone required them to do so. 2% of Catholics, and 5% of white evangelicals. So most other faith communities have higher percentages than Muslim women when it comes to requirement by someone else to wear a religious symbol. And then finally, how do Muslim women view their own faith? You know, while the stereotype out there is that, you know, Islam is misogynistic, or it doesn't favor women, for Muslim women, they actually say, you know, their faith is a source of happiness. And we didn't see any difference between men and women when it came to that reporting. 85% of Muslims said, my faith is a source of my happiness. So this is really important when we are thinking of what does that mean when it comes to our interaction with faith communities? What does it mean when it comes to addressing problems that are often associated with faith or not, and so forth? And how can we, you know, view Islam in, you know, in Muslims, just like we view, for example, Christianity and Christians, Judaism and Jewish community, and so forth. So that's my formal talk on the data and what the data says about American Muslims in general, and specifically about American Muslim women. Sorry, I went a little too fast, but here are very quick questions, 3 questions survey, if you don't mind filling that out. And then definitely follow us on social media so you could get more information like this, or check out our reports on, for example, Muslims for American Progress, where we document contributions of American Muslims of all backgrounds in both genders, of course. Or you could get the latest research that we're conducting. I'm going to stop here and open it up for questions.
Thank you so much. I think this was great flow of information. I felt like I'm almost feeling full, like this is very satisfying to get all these numbers. And maybe, you could keep giving these numbers and statistics to us, and I would, I was happy to see these, in charts.
Absolutely.
And
yes, and that's one of the beautiful things about the work that we do is literally most of these graphs, I pull them from our website. So anyone could go and just take that information and share it with others. And I know this was data heavy, but that's why this important is work, is because we want to start with the facts. Okay, so here is what American Muslims said about themselves. Here's what other faith communities said about themselves. But like I mentioned earlier, I'm happy to, get a little bit more personal or answer other questions.
So we actually have questions coming up. We might start with giving some maybe concrete examples of what do we mean by religious discrimination. Do you get to ask about instances as well in your questionnaires? Like, do you ask them to give you examples?
Yeah. So we don't ask specifically what kind of religious discrimination you're facing, but we have other questions that give us an idea. So for example, one of the questions we asked was, how many have experienced religious-based bullying? If you have children in schools, have they experienced religious-based bullying? So that was one of the questions we asked. And 54% of American Muslim families said they have a child who have experienced religious discrimination in the past year because of their religious identity. And the sad part to that, I mean, the percent is high, but to even make it more heartbreaking for me is 1/4 of these incidents. So when the religious discrimination happened in the school, it actually happened by an adult. So a teacher, an administrator, principal, you name it. It wasn't a fellow student. So that's one example of religious-based bullying or discrimination that have happened. But there are a lot of other projects that document the type of stereotyping and discrimination that take place, not only impacting the American Muslims, but those who appear to be American Muslims. So for example, the Sikh community is on the receiving end of a lot of discrimination and hate and even violence. People have been killed because bigots thought they were Muslim. So those are stories that we know have been documented.
Before we go on, can you come to the previous slide where you had the link? Maybe we can leave this on so that people can go and fill it in.
Yeah.
And we have a question that asks about, like, these Muslim women are obviously facing more challenges in terms of discrimination, and how is that received in the mainstream feminism is the question.
Say that again.
How is the discrimination that Muslim women face are received in the mainstream feminism, and what do you understand by that? Mainstream feminism is also part of the question.
Yes. So if I'm understanding correctly, I'm just trying to pull out the data on this. Is it asking how do mainstream feminists view Muslim women, or vice versa?
I think the first, as you said, how are Muslim women's discrimination perceived, or maybe is there any action by the general feminist activism addressing the discrimination Muslim women face?
Yeah, so there are a couple things to say about that. I think, for example, we did ask about how do religious communities view feminism. And we found that 47% of Muslim women support feminism, okay, compared to 37 of men. When it comes to other faith communities, there wasn't a difference between men and women. However, on the other hand, when we see how the general, general feminist movement view Muslim women, I think it just depends. This is based on my own observation. There are some who understand the intersectionality of, not just gender, but religious, racial, ethnic background, all of that, socioeconomic. So they understand it and they work with Muslim feminists or with the Muslim women communities to address whatever issues exist in those communities. On the other hand, sometimes there's harm that's done by the general feminist movement toward Muslim women. So as an example, one of the questions I mentioned I always receive is, why do you wear this? And, go on and explain the reason why do you wear the headscarf. You could share the data that I just shared with you, that most of us view this as part of our faith community. I have personally been on the receiving end of self-identified white feminists who said, but I still think you're oppressed. So sometimes there is that contradiction in feminist movements. I'm not saying this is all, I'm just saying this is based on personal observation, where sometimes there's not a full understanding of intersectionalities of people's identities, and that could do more harm than good in certain communities.
Thank you for the answer. Yeah. We have another question that asks about how active are Muslims in terms of voting? Like, what's the percentage of American Muslims voting in the last election and likely to vote in the next upcoming one?
Yes, so this is another thing that we have been documenting, which is our civic engagement work. If you go to our website, ispu.org, I want to pull it up, but it's going to pull up all of my other screens. If you go to ispu.org and check out American Muslim Poll, part of American Muslim Poll, which is a general survey of American public with a representative sample of American Muslims. We document a couple things: civic engagement, community and faith, and Islamophobia. So some of the research I shared with you today is out of that report. Civic engagement, we track voter registration and those who said they will register to vote, or those who said they will vote but didn't actually vote. What we found is the good news is in the Muslim American community, it have been increasing. Voter registration and voter participation have been increasing in the Muslim American community. The bad news, it's still not where it needs to be compared to other faith communities, okay? And then there's still a disparity between those who say, I will vote versus those who actually do vote in the American Muslim space. We know there have been a lot of national and local organizations over the last few years who've been very, very active and working with the American Muslim community and getting people out to not only register, but to get them out to vote on the day of voting as well.
Thank you. I see a question here that asks about the variety within Islam, within Muslims. Actually, we talked about the racial variety, but we did not talk about, are we talking about the Sunni, Shia, or any other forms of identifying themselves? Does your research cover these diversities as well?
It covers some of them, not all of them. It covers, for example, gender identification. We found in the Muslim American community, just like in the general public, 1% identify as LGBT. Identify socioeconomic, racial, immigrant versus, native born, and so forth. We have not really gotten into the Sunni Shia question specifically, but we did explore discrimination within the Muslim American community. So how many or what is the percentage of American Muslims who have faced religious discrimination within their own sectarianism within their own community. So we're starting to explore that, but we haven't really gotten into it. And how does that impact the level of Islamophobia that might exist in the American Muslim community? So do we have a level of Islamophobia in the Muslim American community? And we actually found, yes, Muslims, just like the general public, are internalizing Islamophobia. And one of the predictors was if they experienced, sectarianism in their own faith community.
And there's another question about identity. So we saw the data that Muslims are proud to be a Muslim, but also there's this high amount of discrimination. Is that creating any identity confusion, especially in the young generation, because they're also the ones who are most prone to these discriminations? What is the sense that you get from the data about that identity, the confusion about identity?
Yeah, this is a really good question. So identity issues, yes, they're there. And they're there as a result of, Muslims, like I mentioned, are like the general public. We're consuming the same media that everyone else is consuming. So if I'm consuming, if for example, if I'm only reading the New York Times and the New York Times tell me that my faith is worse than cancer and cocaine, over time, I might start believing that, especially if I see incidents in my faith community that might align with that perception. So is it creating an issue with the younger generation? Absolutely, it does. It can create identity issues. But what we're seeing in the American Muslim space, especially among the young people, is the stronger their faith identity is, the stronger their other identities are. And we found, contradicting to what the general public believe or what some people might make you believe, regular attendance to a mosque, help with identity issues. The caveat there is the mosque need to be inclusive. So that's the other part of the research, if you, it depends on a lot of factors, but yes, there is the identity issues that exist. And of course, because the Muslim American community is so diverse, think of issues that might be racial, socioeconomic, environmental. All of these are going to contribute to the identity issues, not just the faith factor. I hope that answered. I know that was a packaged.
Yeah, I think there's a related question to that. Are you offering any education about the mental health aspect of these identity crises? Like, do you offer any education how to handle PTSD or like the question Stockholm syndrome? Or
so we have a couple of resources. We have, like I mentioned, the different research areas that we have. We try to create toolkits. So we have a toolkit on mental health professionals, related, outlining our research on American Muslim youth, so the issues that we have found, either the problems or the issues that the things that could be part of the solution. So we have different toolkits for mental health professionals, for imams, so mosque leaders, how they can make the mosque more inclusive, taking into consideration youth issues. But we also have a network of more than 15 ISPU affiliated scholars. Those are independent scholars that do their own research, whether it's on youth and immigration or, assimilation or mental health or you name it, or ideologically motivated violence, whatever the issue is. We have this amazing network of scholars that are doing all of this work. So we have access not only to their research, but they often do a lot of collaborative work with ISPU, and they're often very accessible for, whether it's for media professionals or for people who are seeking, additional resources. So we have, mental health experts and therapists and you name it.
And there's another question. What are the particular issues about female Muslim life on campus?
Good question. they're similar to other faith communities. But of course, it depends on if you're a first generation college student like I was, that creates its own set of issues, adding to the fact that you're a Muslim female on a university campus. Or if you're coming from a family that have, been to, have generation of college graduates. We did some work with MSA West, so Muslim Student Association, out of California. We looked at some of the issues that some of the students face on campus. So when it came to female to Muslim women, of course, how involved they were on campus, how, if they had any leadership role in their MSAs, or if they were civically engaged in the campus community. But of course, just like other students, there is issues with poverty, sexual activity or drinking, mental health issues, as it relate to, independently, or as it relate to discrimination, whether it's gender or religious. So take all the issues that you know about college campus in general and add a religious layer to it. And that's what are some of the issues that Muslim women might face on a university setting.
And on your slide about the American Muslim women wearing the hijab, you said 1% tells that somebody tells them, and the percentage of, I think it was 54%, right, who see it as a religious observation.
Let me just pull that up quickly, because I know I'm going to get it wrong.
One of
54, yeah. 54 see it as a religious obligation or to please God. So, and then the 21% was so they could be identified as Muslim.
And before that, you said the majority of American Muslim women actually do not wear the hijab.
Yeah.
Right. So do you have a percentage for that?
I think it's about, I think the numbers were about 50-50 at some point. It was like 60-40, but now it's closer to 50-50, where, most Muslim women don't wear the hijab. And now we're, the percentage I shared here is among those who do. Why do they wear it? I could share the exact number with you. I don't have it memorized at the top of my head.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, that would be also interesting to see. And I have another question about American Muslim women's power, like position in the decision-making positions, especially with the religious leadership in a more inclusive mosque and many other MSAs or other Muslim organizations.
Yeah.
Do you have any research or data about the role of women in these decision-making positions?
Yeah. So not specifically. We know that it depends on the community and on the mosque. Some communities are better than others in terms of including women in leadership role, either organizations or mosques. We know that's an issue that have been discussed a lot, and it's changing over time. So where we are today in terms of women involvement versus where we were 20 years is not the same story. We did ask Muslim women, about if they were satisfied with the way things are running in their own mosque, and more than 50% said yes, they were. So that we have a research on. In terms of how many actually hold a leadership role in the mosque or not, I don't think we have that data yet.
Thank you so much. Okay, there's one more question. Why are Muslim women strikingly different in their choice of reporting to public authorities more frequently? That's an interesting fact as well. Like you said, Muslim women are more likely to report the case of domestic violence or unwanted sexual advancements.
Yeah.
Do you see a reason for that?
So this, the reporting, it's not specific to Muslim women, it's specific to Muslim, right? So it could be reported by a woman, or it could be reported by someone else who's familiar with the case. Why? We don't know yet. This is a piece that will need to be investigated a little bit more. But one thing that's really interesting about it is it contradicts what the perception out there about American Muslims is, that they don't work well with their local law enforcement, or they don't report crimes or what have you. Like I said, we don't have the research on why they do it, but my guess it could be related to the level of education, or you know, or knowing more about their rights and responsibilities. Obviously, it's going to be different from community to community. In some communities, it might be less, but again, it need to be investigated a little bit more.
And how hard is it to get a job in the USA for Muslim women? How can we know
It's a really
that?
good question, right? So yes, this is one of the pieces that we're hoping to explore more. How hard is it for people to, or if they're facing discrimination in the workspace? Just based on my general knowledge, having been, you know, doing this work for a while, we know that people who there's religious discrimination based on dress code. We know how formal the dress code is in American corporate America, or in the general public is. So there's that kind of discrimination, and there have been a lot of lawsuits that have made national headlines because of that. We also know there have been a lot of research on your name, right? How your name sounds might impact if HR will call you for an interview or not. Hence the best practice right now that's being promoted, that you should leave the name out from the resume or the job application when you're considering candidates. But we know that's a fact that's out there, not only for Muslim women, but for minorities in general. So the more minority like your name sounds, the more obstacles that might be on your in your way. We also have anecdotal stories of for example, you know, we don't have the data on it yet, but we've heard a lot of stories about those who are in the job market. Are they facing discrimination to be promoted, right? So if they're Muslim, especially if they're visibly Muslim women, are they facing discrimination in terms of promotion? Are they getting to leadership positions or not? So those are things that we're hoping to explore in terms of a specific research, but there have been stories about that.
Thank you so much. And there's a question, I don't know if you want to answer it, that there's, can a Muslim woman be an imam or speak as a minister in a mosque? So this is actually related to the women's leadership in religious question.
Well,
and there are cases of, you know, female-led mosques and prayers in the US.
Right. So you know, I love that question. I mean, we could ask the same question. Can women be rabbis, right? Can women be priests in certain Christian denominations? So again, there is a gender issue to it, but there is also a theological issue for that question. I am not a religious scholar, so I can't give the religious answer. What I could say is that conversation is happening in the Muslim American and the Muslim world, just like it is happening in Christianity and in Judaism. And the beautiful thing about Muslims, and specifically American Muslims, is we're not only racially diverse, but you know, there's a lot of different thoughts on that topic. And whether you agree or not is, when it's a personal, but it's also a religious decision to make. Muslim women are making their own space, whether it's in their specific community mosque or creating their own mosques. For example, I think it's the American mosque out of California, you know, founded by and for all women, where women could lead prayers there. Do you agree or not? That's not the conversation. It is what Muslim American women are deciding to do with their own faith. We know have a lot of instances where Muslim women have led prayers either as a protest or to show this is what I could do within my faith. Scholars are still debating it, so that's not for me to decide. But what I would say is it should not be that question shouldn't just become a Muslim question unless it's from the Muslim community. For us in the Muslim community, that is an Islamic question. For people outside of that community, ask that question the same way you would ask of the Jewish community, of the Christian community, of any other faith community.
Thank you. And I think we don't have much time, but I want to end with a question. And beginning with the first thing that you said, like that 90% of coverage about Islam is negative.
Yeah.
And this has been going on for now more than 10 years now. Like, I mean, you might even think that you will get to a better place with this much level of civic action and education, and so many things has been done since 2001, like 9/11.
Yeah.
But yet we are still here at 90% of negative coverage.
Absolutely.
And what do you make of that? And what must be done maybe differently? Can something be done differently to change this in any way?
Yeah. So couple things. The first one is this did not all start with 9/11. This miseducation and misrepresentation of Islam and Muslims predates 9/11. Okay, if you look at Edward Said's work with Orientalism and how Islam and Muslims have been portrayed as others and exotic, as people who are backward, that's way pre 9/11. So let's not fool ourselves and think 9/11 changed everything. We should continue to educate the public, but the only way this would work is, one, allow people to speak for themselves. So let Muslim women speak for themselves. They are capable of sharing their own narrative and their own stories and their own struggles, just like any other human being. So don't speak for them. Pass the mic, as some would say. Recognize the beautiful diversity that we have in our own faith community and move beyond the model citizen, the model person, because none of us could be a model anything. We're human beings with flaws. And then the last piece is recognize that this is part of a pattern. It's not just Muslim specific. Right now, a lot of people will take a look at Islamophobia and say, oh, this is a Muslim issue. It's not. Islamophobia is, for example, is just one branch of the whole tree of bigotry that targets all other minority groups. So once we recognize this is part of a system that impacts, Jews, Black, other minority groups, and it's systemic, that's when we move beyond just, let's all just be happy and learn about each other. We should continue to learn and be happy with each other and learn about each other, but also recognize it's a systemic thing. And when we acknowledge the intersectionality of all of the different communities impacted by it, and start creating coalitions, that's when we could make a shift.
Thank you so much. I can keep talking, but I think we're out of time. So I will just quit here and let Ibrahim do the closing. Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. I see your question about reading recommendation. Honestly, go to our website, ispu.org. Not only does it have all the research that I talked about, but it have bibliography, books, scholars, everything that you could think of. It's located there. Or feel free to email, sign up for our newsletter where you could get more of those resources. Or feel free to email me. You'll find my contact information on the website. I'm more than happy to share any of this information with anyone.
Well, thank you very much, Petra. And thank you, Samiha. So obviously, this is a topic that is stimulating a lot of interest and curiosity. And fortunately, thanks to your work and work of similar nature, there is a lot of energy dedicated to addressing that curiosity, all those questions, and new coming ones, as you projected some new research interest.
Yes.
and which we look forward to receiving and reading.
Thank you.
Everyone for their participation and their insightful questions. So hope to see you on our next Coffee Night event this Thursday, where we will be hosting Dr. John Esposito of Georgetown University. And please keep an eye on our newsletter and announcements. Wish Muslim friends a blessed Ramadan time, and wish everyone best of health. Just wash those hands. Stay out of trouble.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night.
Have a
Bye.
great evening. Bye-bye.